You're listening to Power Athlete Radio, a podcast dedicated to empowering your performance every damn day. Join former NFL pro and Power Athlete founder John Welborn as he dissects the greatest minds in strength, conditioning, and more. So whether your goal is to be the hammer, destroy mediocrity, or simply move the dirt, you've come to the right place. Now with the warm-up done, let the gains begin.
Hey, Power Athlete Nation, I want you to put on your creative hat for today. We have Mr. Brandon Epstein, who wrote a book called Program to Fail. It's an interesting book where he gets into not only the psychology of failure, but power versus force, and really just gets into dispelling subconscious programming and what's causing a lot of us to not meet our goals. So it's an interesting podcast. I want you guys to buckle up and remember to wear that creative hat. Mr. Brandon Epstein. Let's talk about the book. Let's get into this a little bit. Thank you for sending it over. Had a chance to go in. I've always felt that, failure is by far the best teacher. I mean, the age old, failure, an empty pocket and a hungry belly will teach people a lot more than anything else. So.
Yeah, no doubt. Pain is a very powerful driver of behavior change. That's for sure.
So how'd you get into this?
I got into it initially playing college football myself, actually. My freshman year,
nice.
Rode the bench.
Where'd you play?
I played at Whittier College down in Los Angeles.
Yeah, no, my brothers played at the Claremont schools.
Okay.
Yeah, so cool. Skyac.
Yeah, those are like the more Ivy League type schools down there. Whittier is kind of, the ugly stepchild. But for me at 18, I was like, I get to keep playing football beyond high school. Sign me up. So me and my best friend from high school both signed up, and we went down there to LA. And my freshman year, though, I kind of had a rude awakening because I didn't play. Besides one blowout game, I just was on the bench. And I was like, after the season, this isn't fun. Like, who wants to practice, have your whole life basically be football, but not get to play in the most fun part, which is actual game? So in that off season, I was already pretty dialed. I was looking into physical training, nutrition, supplements, all that stuff. So I was looking for something different, something outside the box. And that brought me into the local supplement shop in my hometown. And the dude there, I started asking questions like, hey, I'm trying to get better at football. Like, what supplements do you recommend? What's the next pro hormone? What do you got for me, bro? Give me something good. And he started just asking me questions about myself and just asking me just how I felt about myself, and just going beyond just like the physical layer that usually I identify with as a football player. And I had no self-awareness really at that time. And so when he started to dig into me a little bit, we started to uncover just the anxiety that I had, and the anxiety I was carrying onto the football field, and what was leading to me not performing my best. And as we started to go into this, he started teaching me some techniques to override this anxiety. And one of them was, and everyone who's not driving car and I can try this, is like, just look off into the peripheries of your eyes. Just look off into the peripheries and just breathe deep through your nose. And the first time I did that was like the first time that I didn't experience anxiety, but I never knew I had anxiety before that. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't talked about back then, which wasn't even so long ago. This is 2008, 2009. But at that time, like, mental health wasn't really a discussion. And so I realized, oh, there's a better way to live. This is what it's like to be present. And so I was hooked immediately. I was like, I don't know what you just did to me, but I want more of it. And I started going down a rabbit hole of learning all types of techniques from this guy. He became my full-time sensei. And he started teaching me how to shift my brain waves through meditation techniques down into alpha, theta, delta, creating almost like psychedelic experiences through meditation that were so intense, teaching me visualization techniques, teaching me about the energy system, which blew my mind because, I had taken biology class, but I never learned about the energy system, the meridians, the chakras, understanding how we create energy in the body, how I can use it. And I was a defensive lineman. So he was teaching me these techniques, how I could explode off the line of scrimmage and become more powerful by using these energy techniques. And, long story short, I was very successful. I started my sophomore year, had a lot of standout games, and loved it so much that I became known as the guru by our athletic trainer because I was using these techniques to help my teammates heal from injuries and also to improve their performance. And I was just sold from that point forward. At 19 years old, I was like, this is what I'm doing in my life. I don't know how you do this. I don't know if this is a job or what this would be, but this is what I want to do. And so now we're 16 years later or so, and now I get to do it at the highest level with professional athletes, UFC fighters, NFL players, MLB, business owners, and yeah, bro. So that's a little bit of the origin story.
Yeah, no, shit, dude, that's wild. And then obviously you've done all this work, and this is where the book came from, correct? So
Yeah, exactly. And the book,
and I only ask because we've
ahead.
had dudes on the podcast before where they write the book before they actually have any practical knowledge of it. So I had a guy come on, and he had this like great thing, and I was like, hey, like, you know, what's the practical application? Oh, I really haven't got to that yet. The first piece was the book, so I always thought that felt like a little bit of horse before the cart, or cart before the horse.
And I would say I wanted to write this book for so many years, and the reason I didn't was that exact thing. It was like I wanted to have case studies that I could run people through and say, like, look, this worked for me in my life. It worked for other people. And I feel like I wanted to do this full time at 22 years old when I graduated college, but there's so many steps that had to come beforehand for me to get the credibility and experience to be able to do this at the highest level. One of those was learning to grow a business on my own and taking all these mental techniques and applying them to myself as an entrepreneur and growing a 7-figure business and being able to say, hey, I'm not just some guy who talks about these things. Like, I'm actually in the arena putting them to work, because anyone who's an entrepreneur knows that the beginning of entrepreneurship, especially, or any small business, is extremely grueling mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And to make it through that and to actually have a profitable company and to scale it up to 7 figures and beyond, like, it takes a lot of deep work to get there. And some people do it through pure force. And what I did was I used all these mental techniques and applied them to myself so I could get there. And then once they started working well for me, I began to bring them to a lot of the athletes that I began to bring into my circle. And I think a lot of things are just about frequency. It's like when you get to a certain frequency, you meet other people there. You probably experienced that in your life, right? Like when you get to a certain level, other people at that level just start gravitating to you. They start finding you in your life, whether it's emotionally or what you've achieved in the physical external world. People meet you there. And that's been my experience. The more I achieve, more that I unlock, more I'm able to do for others, the more people come meet me at these higher levels.
Nice. So as I was cruising through the book, the one thing that kind of stuck out to me was the primary programming for life. I thought that was pretty interesting, especially the fact that it happened somewhere between birth and 6, 7 years old, 8 years old. So I was going to want to dig in a little more on that.
Yeah. So we're all born into this primary programming that happens from our family, from our community, from 0 to 7. Because if you think about it, we were born to survive in tribes. And if you got kicked out of your tribe, that's certain death, right? That's just how we've been evolved. And so that's not necessarily the society we live in now. We have a lot of safety nets, right? Maybe there's foster systems, there's food stamps, things like that. But in the past, there wasn't. So if you didn't assimilate into your tribe, they're going to kick you out. If you're not doing what everyone else in the tribe does, if you don't believe what they believe, you're out, which is certain death. And so that's why in our first 7 years of life, we are programmed to believe not necessarily what even people say, but like who they are. We're taking that on. And so anyone who's done some work on themselves, you probably see patterns from one or both of your parents within yourself that you need to overcome as you mature and as you try to strive for more in your life. And maybe it's even things from your community, your society, your friend group. And so a lot of it's good. And I tell people you can very easily see where you've been programmed to succeed and where you've been programmed to fail. Just look at the different buckets of your life. Look at your career, look at your finances, look at your peace of mind, happiness, your physical health, your relationships, and see how you relate with the people in your tribe, your work relationships, your romantic relationships. Give them all a score from 1 to 10. The lowest scores are the areas you've been programmed to fail. And it's not like a time to like blame your parents or anyone. It's just matter of fact. Obviously, you picked up some programming during those early primary years, and maybe some throughout life through different lived experiences that now have programmed you to act out in the way in the world that's creating less than desirable results. So the book is all about teaching you how to bring awareness to that, how to move through it, and how to reprogram yourself to succeed.
All right. So how do we reprogram?
So nothing happens in your head. This isn't mental work. what we have to understand is that the thoughts in our head, we have 80% of our thoughts are negative on average. The average person, 95% are repeat.
We interrupt this episode with a shameless self-promotion. Power Athlete delivers battle-tested performance programming for every kind of athlete. So do you want to go from average Joe to MVP? Then dominate with Field Strong. Get stacked and jacked with Jack Street. Hustle in life and still build muscle with Grindstone. Fear no opponent with Dragon Slayer. Be harder than coffin nails with Hammer. Max out minimal equipment with Lean Enable. Or unlock those newbie gains with Bedrock. Get over to powerathletehq.com/training and choose your 7-day free trial right here, right now. Get lifting, get training, get in shape, all while listening to the rest of this show. Well, I mean, I've always believed that people, and I think it's a quote, people live 1,000 deaths before they ever live their own. I mean, if you could actually tap in, and I always thought it'd be dangerous if one day we could actually verbalize what was going through our minds so that other people could hear. I mean, just the amount of like negative reinforcement and attacking. I mean, to the point, I have 2 twin daughters that are 12. And so because they're 12, I get to hear some of their monologue and the things that they say out loud. And I'm like, nobody is going to notice your shoelaces. These shoelaces are messed up. I'm like, you need new ones? We'll get new ones. Nobody's going to notice your shoelaces. And they imagine, I'm like, most people in life, and this is what I've been trying to teach them, are just trying to like straighten out their own shit. They are so concerned with themselves that the only reason that they're going to notice something about you is if they can negatively attack you to make you or to make themselves feel better. And I'm like, those are just defensive mechanisms by people that are insecure. And, especially for 12-year-old girls, there's kids are mean, and a lot of girls are mean, and the way they feel better about themselves is by attacking. And I'm like, do you really think it's that your shoe? I mean, and this is just something I dealt with yesterday where it was like broken shoelace. So I'm in the car, you broke your shoelace. I took off my shoelace and like fixed the shoelace. And she's like, somebody's going to say something that the shoelaces don't match. And I was like, if they do, you tell me and we'll figure this whole thing out. But I guarantee most people were not going to notice your fucking shoelaces. And so just the joys of having 12-year-old daughters is a daily lesson, and like feels like I'm on a comedy stage, like, doing stand up at like Kill Tony or something.
Yeah. Well, you can kind of already see that less than optimal programming start to bubble up, right? And maybe that comes from their friend group and what they say and what is cool, what is not cool, what do they believe, because a lot of it doesn't just come from us as parents. It's just like the communities, the kids that they're in, they hear things enough times. That's how the subconscious learns through repetition. It's like, if anything's out of line, and it's just a reflection, right? It's like they're probably noticing these things in other girls, and other girls are noticing with them. And it's just a reflection of their own insecurities being perpetuated. And it's just this cycle, right? And so what I was getting at is that 95% of our conscious thoughts are repeated every day. We're just living in this cycle. Think about it. It's just like the same thing. You think about the same thing, right? You think about your family, think about your work, you think about same thing. We're just on a loop all the time. So none of the work I do is in the head. And this is why I can't really necessarily tell anyone what I do. I have to show them. They have to experience it. I'm not going to put you on the spot, but if you did want to experience my work, it's pretty vulnerable work, I could do it with you so you could actually experience it. But before we get there, I will just try to explain it the best that I can.
Cool.
Because all of our programming lives at this subconscious level, which means it's not conscious. If we were aware of it, we wouldn't do it, right? And so we see a society that's been programmed to fail, but they're not consciously programmed to fail, right? If you ask someone, right, we're 70% obesity rate in the US. Like you ask all those people who are obese, like, hey, do you want to be obese? No, of course they don't. But subconsciously, they're wired in a way that creates that behavior, and they're not making the choice out of a conscious, hey, let me do this or not do this. There's programming at the subconscious level that tells them that it's better for them to continue to eat and move and participate in life in the way that they are than to change their actions. Now, to an average person, consciously, rationally, it makes no sense. But if we go beneath the surface, I'll give you an example, because part of my journey, like I said, I grew a business with over 1 million YouTube subscribers in the fitness space. I got to see a lot of these case studies play out. And I would see that someone who's struggling to lose weight, it wasn't about, hey, just eat in a calorie deficit and do these exercises a few times a week. For them, if you go beneath the conscious surface, subconsciously, you might get a mom who believes subconsciously that the more time she dedicates to work, the more or to working out or to eating right, the less time she's going to have with her family. So subconsciously, she believes that if she were to dedicate time to that, she'd be a worse mom. And so she's not willing to make that sacrifice. To her, there's more pain involved with making that behavior change because her kids mean more to her than she does even, right? And so there's all these different programs we run that back ourselves into a corner because most of these people who do these things, they're not even aware of them. They're beneath the surface. And so how do we get to them? We have to close our eyes. We have to go within. This isn't fast food. This is the opposite of the society we live in where everything's automatic. I want it right now. You have to slow down. You have to close your eyes and you actually have to feel into what it is you want in your life. And then notice and feel into the emotional resistance that comes up. And resistance is just a word for doesn't feel good. So if anyone right now wants to participate in this, get some live coaching, they can feel within their body what I'm talking about by just thinking about an area of their life that they're trying to achieve more in. Maybe, hey, I want to make more money, or I want to achieve this physical result in my body, or I want my marriage to be better. I want you to feel what comes up in your body with your eyes closed as you think about that. And what you're going to find is that there's going to be a sensation. It usually lives in the upper stomach or lower stomach. It could live anywhere in the chakras and down the center line of your body, but there's going to be some physical, emotional resistance. And if you go sit in the middle of that and you ask yourself, what am I believing to be true that's creating this emotional experience right now? You're going to immediately uncover a line of code, a piece of program that is creating the results that you're currently experiencing in your life. And I can't tell you what that is, but once we've brought awareness to it, and people can only find their body. That's why I don't give advice in my coaching. Like, I help people find it in their own bodies. Can't tell you what it is. You have to find it in your own body. And part of my work is I can feel into other people's bodies. It might sound kind of woo-woo, but it is what it is. When you become skilled in anything, you're able to do things that other people say aren't supposed to be possible. So you'll feel in your body. And once you come to that, you bring awareness to it. Okay, let's take the fitness example because that's a pretty easy one that's not so charged for people. You might find that, okay, I believe I can't afford to eat healthy, right? So you never follow a diet, or maybe you do and you yo-yo on and off of it because you believe that you can't afford to eat healthy. So we have to accept that belief as is true. So we stop resisting it, because what we resist persists. What we can accept, we can change. And I have a technique that I like to take people through where I have them visualize a timeline for their life. And I have them imagine that there's a cloud of energy living right in front of them. And it represents this belief that's been living inside of them that I believe that I can't afford to eat healthy. And so what we're going to do is we're going to breathe in. And on the exhale, we're going to imagine a powerful wind moving from right to left. And this is an NLP technique for anyone who's familiar with neurolinguistic programming. You're going to watch this cloud of energy move from right to left into the past. And if you do the exercise, if you're actually going through it, you'll feel it actually move into the past, and you'll be able to be present in this void. In this void, we want to choose the opposite. Energy can't be created nor destroyed, so we're going to choose the opposite belief. The opposite belief would obviously be, I believe I can afford to eat healthy. We're going to breathe through that. We're going to feel our body just accepting it. And then we're going to integrate it. And so we integrate it through repetition at the subconscious level. And so usually when you're going through this process, it's going to be more than one belief that you need to change. So you record a voice memo reading every one of these beliefs that you need to change, the new version of them. And then you're going to listen to it every morning when you're waking up with your eyes closed still, while you're still in that alpha brainwave state. That's kind of like half awake, half asleep. And the same thing every night before you go to sleep. And then throughout the day as much as you want, just for repetition's sake. You do that, and eventually you are going to reprogram that belief. So that's a little snapshot of what that process looked like. And obviously it's energy work. So it's happening in your energetic, emotional body. So it's not a rational thing. But that's what happens.
Yeah. When you work with professional athletes, people that are high achievers, that have like attained some level of success, does the work change, or does it, because I mean, if you're talking about people don't believe that they can do these things, but to reach a high level of athletic performance, you have to believe that you're able to accomplish things that most normal people can't. And whether or not you physically teach yourself or mentally, does the training and the work that you do take on a different, tint, slant, whatever, when you start working with like high level athletes?
Not particularly, because all these things are human conditions. They're all programming. Like, I'll tell you what, like a lot of the pro athletes I'm working with, they're dealing with romantic issues, they're dealing with family issues, they're dealing with the same things that most of us average people deal with. So it's very similar. But I will say this, that the average person doesn't want to do this work. So the people who are even going to gravitate to this work in the first place are the high achievers, are the professional athletes, are the people who want to be great, because they're going, okay, you're telling me there's areas where I'm weak. I want to make those strengths. So even to get someone who wants to do this work, it's a special type of person, because it's not easy. It's not fast food. It is like doing an extremely difficult workout, but emotionally, spiritually. Now, I will also say that they're dealing with different types of problems, because they've already on their own moved through the governor in many ways. So the governor usually in a car will say, hey, you can only go this fast. Well, on their own, they've been able to move through that governor. It said they could go 60. They already bursted through it. They're going 80. They're going 100. And so maybe I'm saying, hey, we want to go 120 miles per hour now. And so it's the same type of work. Ultimately, it's the same process I'm taking them through. But now we're striving towards a championship belt versus, someone might just want to feel comfortable sparring, for example, and believe that they can have success there. So it's just higher and higher levels of performance, but it's the same process in the work that I'm doing.
This episode of Power Athlete Radio is powered by Train Heroic, the most immersive strength training app experience on the market. We've built an online training business by partnering with Train Heroic to deliver all of our world-class training programs like Jack Street, Hammer, Field Strong, and Grindstone. To learn which Power Athlete training program best suits your goals, head to powerathletehq.com/training. And if you're a coach looking to build a business with the best training tech in the business, head to trainheroic.com/powerathletehq. And now back to the show. Do you believe, what was wild with, I was fortunate to play for a decade in the NFL, and it was pretty interesting when I would meet people, especially young guys versus kind of like older, more established vets. And I have a NFL kid here for the last couple of weeks that we've been working with, trying to get him ready he's going into his contract year, so we're just trying to clean up some stuff. And I was trying to explain to him a story that, I came in and started as a rookie, and then I got hurt, and then I came in, and the second year I started a whole bunch of, I think I started 16 games that next year. I got that first opening game, I came out and I pitched a shutout against a pretty good Hall of Fame player. And from that moment on, I wasn't considered a young guy anymore. And so when the coach would call and be like, hey, young guys, get out there early, I never went out there. And he's like, you're not a young guy anymore. And I realized, because I always thought that like the difference between the old guys and the young guys had to do with age. And it wasn't. It was really about maturity. It was about experience, execution, and what you had done that put you, because there were still guys that were 4 and 5 years that were still considered young guys. And as I was trying to explain to him, and he's a starter, obviously going into that contract year, of being like, doing things like a professional, not getting overly emotion. If you, make a mistake or miss a play or you get beat, like you come back and it's got to be like water's off a duck's back. Like, and I think that's why football, I get into this a lot too, where parents are like, oh, I would never let my kids play football, too many head injuries. And I tell them, I'm like, I think you are robbing your children, or especially your sons, of playing football for the mere fact that football teaches people to be process-oriented and not outcome-oriented. And, the idea that like, hey, I got 70 plays and I'm going to play this one, win, lose, or draw. I got to go on to the next one, and the clock's never going to stop. So if I dwell on one in the past, it's going to make mistakes in the future. As soon as that game's done, I got to get ready for another game. So I end up being a very process-driven person, whereas I feel like a lot of people I run into are very outcome-driven. Where, like once I get this car, I'll be successful. Once I have this house, like this is the best meal I'm going to have. Instead of looking at it like, hey, like all of these are just pieces in a greater kind of mosaic that I'm working towards. And that was something we've been working a bunch with, is like this idea of like, you have to become a process-driven person, that this is just one little brick in the wall, and, not, missing a day or, maybe not performing at 100 isn't going to be the difference. It's actually the cumulative effort. And I think what I've seen from my ivory tower, because, coming out and obviously retiring and then doing all the things that I've done, the people that I meet that are very process driven are willing to do the work. Whereas a lot of people that I meet that end up kind of failing within business or whatever endeavor they go into, it's this idea of like, well, once I reach 7 figures, I'm successful. Or once I do this, and these kind of weird milestones. And then once they attain it, and I think this is what happens with fat loss and people getting in shape. If I can just lose 20 pounds, I'll be happy. And then they lose 20 pounds and they're still not fucking happy. Or, hey, once I get in shape. And so I feel that we've been in this country very conditioned to attach our successes and failures to stuff. And that's, something I run into, within our own, power athlete, within our coaching and programs, is people have these kind of set goals with set times. And there's never a thought of like, well, what happens on day +1 and day 2 and day 3? Whereas I look at it like, when I die, this is the body of work I've presented. And that mindset I feel is more unique than the one that I encounter, which feels like the majority of people.
Yeah. Well, if we call a spade, we've been sold into mental slavery, especially here.
Well, that's assuming that this is real and we're not just living in a simulation like the Matrix.
Regardless of whether we are living in a Matrix or not, we all know that the kingdom lives within.
Yeah.
Right? The kingdom lives within, and it's always here right now. And so you've experienced this. A lot of your high achieving clients and listeners have experienced this. Like you said, it doesn't matter how much weight you lose, how much money you make, how much you achieve in your career. You're still going to be in that cycle of when I, if I, will I. When the truth is, you're there. You've always been there. And it really is breaking the shackles of mental slavery to accept that. A lot of people talk about presence. What does that mean? How many people actually experience presence? Real, true presence is being able to, like you said, be in the process so deeply that you're there. You're really there. And understanding that whatever external achievements you want to get to down the line are just a byproduct of being there for it. And you're going to do the work anyway. You're going to do it anyway. You're going to have to live every one of these moments either way. So you can either be thinking about the future and not present and underperforming, or you can actually give yourself permission to arrive there and fully be in the expansive experience, which can be a lot. I don't think many people even experience much time in the present moment. And if you really sink into it, it's extremely expansive and it's almost like euphoric if you can really sit into it. And I think most athletes experience it most when they're playing their sport. They're able to be there, and then we call it a flow state or being in the zone. But the truth is, like, you can experience that throughout life all the time. It doesn't just have to be in the sport. And the more you can experience it in life all the time, the easier it is for you to feel that way when you're playing your sport. And so coming back to the programming, all my work is just to get you back into the present. Because when you let go of the programming that's causing you to think about the past or your future, the only thing that is left is the present. So I'm not trying to have anyone become something that they're not. I'm trying to bring them back home to themselves and realize that they're already there. And that takes a reprogram, because as those thoughts bubble up of what about this? What about this? We have to deal with the subconscious root of it beneath the surface. And if you do that, the only thing that's going to be left over is just the eternal now.
How do you deal with this with social media? I feel like when I look at social media, there's this always, one of my favorite ones is the FOMO, where people have this fear of missing out, that everybody else's life looks so much better and that everything else everybody is doing is, so much better than what you were doing. Trying to explain that to my kids has been an interesting one. I always tell them that the best moment in your life is the one you're living at this very moment. Mm-hmm. And as long as you feel that this is the coolest thing that you could be doing and that there's nothing cooler than this moment that you're experiencing, you'll be much happier. The idea that, somebody else is doing something, and that's, I think social media, for all of its benefits, and obviously we're connecting that way, creates a extreme feeling of loneliness and emptiness, and that, what is it? What is it? It's comparison is the death of joy, kind of a
thief of joy.
Yeah. I mean, that idea that people are constantly comparing, that somebody else is doing it better, they got something nicer than me, and that like feeling of like, as good as I've attained, there's always going to be somebody better. Like, hey, you go out and you buy a new car, and then all of a sudden you see something pull up, and it's Andrew Tate in his brand new Bugatti, or Jeff Bezos on his 500-foot yacht, which people look at and think, wow, it looks great. All I think of is, what a fucking pain in the ass to have a boat that big. Can you imagine like and I know he probably has people that worry about all that stuff, but like I look at it like the more shit you have, the more anxiety I have. This is something that I fought against my entire life until, now that I have kids and we live out here in Texas and I got a shop. I mean, there's all of these things. I have never been a fan of stuff. I feel like stuff is just more things to manage and takes away the time to, do really what you want to, which is, make yourself happy, whether it's, training or experiences or what. Like, I have a fear that I don't want to die and have to have somebody go through and sell all my stuff. Like, like these people pass away and like all of a sudden you run into these people, they're like, oh, I got to go clear my mom and dad's house out. I got to sell all this stuff. And they got project cars and this and this. Like that is my greatest fear, that I'll pass away and somebody will have to go and like, sort through or like, manage like, you ever see any of those hoarding shows? Those give me anxiety. Yeah. I watched one of them and like it gave me the worst anxiety, and I don't ever have anxiety, but the amount of shit that these people had and they were like falling on top of them, I'm like how do people live like that? But I mean, that's where people, I think in our society, you're talking about programming. We've been programmed to equate our value with how much stuff we have, or more importantly, the things that are attached to us. And I think that's a fucking terrible, terrible way to live.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of circles back to the social media conversation of not enoughness. And where does that come from? And to answer your initial question, I tell most of my professional athletes, like, there's nothing for you on social media. There isn't. If you're, I work with professional baseball players, NFL players, like what they could get in sponsorships is just so minimal compared to if they ball out and they're fully present on the field. Their contracts are just so big these days. Like, there's nothing for you on social media. Now, to other people like me, I just signed a client this morning to work with me coaching from Bahrain, and he found me through Instagram. Like, it's a powerful tool. Like, I'm not going to say I need it, but it's a powerful tool that can be used to my advantage. And I don't have a lever like a $100 million contract playing my sport that I can pull. And so social media is just a powerful weapon that needs to be wielded with a lot of discernment and a lot of discipline. And I think that most of us don't have the discernment to use it in that way and the discipline to use it that way. Even myself, like I catch myself, it's like, there's business opportunities that could be sitting in my inbox at all times. So sometimes I even catch myself just being like, what's going on? It's like, dude, chill out.
What
you'll need to be checking that.
What kind of things do you look at?
Oh, just Instagram.
Oh,
yeah. Just because I use it to connect with a lot of like potential clients. So it's like, oh, I'm just curious. Like, have I heard back from this person? Yeah, let me move these things along. And that is just a compulsion. It's just candy. It's just like having candy in your pocket at all times. So all that to say, if you're a professional athlete that can, or a business owner who doesn't have to use social media, don't use it. There's nothing for you on there. Guys like us who are using it as a tool, I think it's really important for us to just use discernment when we're on social media and make sure we're using it's not using us.
Yeah, I love, I've always been into cars. Like, I like cars. I actually love them. I work on them. I weld, I fab, I build stuff. So I'm constantly looking at like either fabrication, people that weld, or people that are building amazing things where I think, oh shit, that's pretty, like, I don't think I'm ever surprised by the level of creativity that I come across on like Instagram. Like, it just blows my mind the things that people create with like, with cars and just anything, whether it be like I like building stuff. So whether it be cars or container homes or just anything that's artistic that people can turn into like physical things, just blow my mind. And then what's funny too is your phone ends up kicking you information for the people that you're around the most. I think what happens if you put a bunch of iPhones together, they just kind of all maybe communicate, because all of a sudden, like, obviously I told you I train a bunch of Brazilians. The amount of like Brazilian content that I get kicked, and majority of usually like big butted Brazilian girls in barbecue, is unbelievable. Where I'm like, man, this is great ways to cook picanha, and this chick's got a huge ass. Yeah. So it's I tell them when I see them, I'm like, stop looking at big butted Brazilian girls, dude. It's kicking it to my phone. I don't need that distraction. But the car stuff, to me, I mean, I've always believed that like artistic expression is important. Like you got to be able to create something, whether it, like you said, like a book or, program or, something physical. I think you need that form of expression. At least I do. I need to go build stuff, and my wife's constantly like, you seem a little like anxious. You need to like go out and like fuck some shit up or go break something or demo something. And I think that's like for me is a good outlet.
Yeah. And I imagine that when you played your sport, like that was that outlet, right? Like you were an artist, if you will, on the field.
No, I was a fucking thug.
Savage.
Yeah, no, I was a thug. I was a girl I dated called me a hooligan. She thought I was just out there to cause trouble and fuck people up. And that's all I was. I just like to go out and fight people. And that was it. And I got paid money to do it. And then you retire and you realize that nowhere in this world are they going to pay you for that. So I was sad the day it ended. And something I try to explain to a lot of the young guys I work with is you have a very short opportunity to stand with your face in the sun and be the greatest at your sport. Like I never, I was good at like realizing it at the moment, but I don't think I realized the magnitude of it. I mean, it's almost impossible to. You're in your 20s, you're doing this, and you figure everybody does it. It's going to happen forever. So being able to explain to them the magnitude of what they're doing, and enjoy it, and something. The other thing I think that kind of hurt me a little bit is I was a rhetoric major in college, and through all this different philosophy and whatnot, I started as kind of a stoic, and the idea that if you enjoy something too much and it's too important to you, if it goes away, then you'll be too sad. So this kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out attitude, I think kind of hurt me a little bit, where I was like, oh yeah, like if it ends tomorrow, I'll be fine. And then when it did end, it took me a long time to realize that I really enjoyed the process and the, just to use a good analogy, you spend all week, all summer, all off season, all your life sharpening a blade that you get to effectively use to, cut and use the blade in a meaningful way on the field playing football. And like the camaraderie and the competition and all those, like there's no way to replicate that anywhere else on the planet. And then once it ends and the cheering ends, you kind of step away from it and you're like, wow, this is a really big hole to fill. And so as I've, started, talking and working with like some younger athletes, being able to be like, at some point it happens to everybody, but you have to be able to prepare for it and understand like, hey, this was a one point in my life and I get the chance to live many, many lives. Like the idea that, you're born or you die and you're born and you're reborn again so many times within the same life has to be important. But I know when I retired, I know why professional athletes get depressed. I know why they kill themselves. I know why they take drugs and this, because when you've been on this stage for so long and no longer are you on it, people don't have the tools to be able to go through and be successful in other ways.
Yeah. I think that is almost the perfect time for these guys to do the reprogramming work, is when they're making that shift, because the programs build your identity. And so it's like, maybe those programs you're running worked in that identity as a professional athlete. And then as you make that transition, you might have to go back and audit a little bit and be like, are these all going to work for me in this next season of life? Because like you said, it's a death and a rebirth. So as you go through this cycle of dying, it's like an ego death, if you will, right? Mm-hmm. Of this identity that was built up. I'm the fucking man, and as you die in that, your rebirth. And who are you now? And sitting into the tension of that and discovering it and deciding, what do you need? What do you need to believe to be true to have success in this season of your life? So I think it's a really good question to ask yourself.
Nice. You have a concept in the book of leveraging power versus force. Can you get into that one a little bit and which one's better than the other?
Yeah. So we all know force, right? You have to take the action one way or another. Power is removing the rational resistance So you're taking the action from a place of flow, from a place of not necessarily ease in the sense of like it doesn't take effort, but ease as in like you're being pulled towards it. It's inspiring instead of it just feeling like an obligation. So an example could be like someone has a goal to work out 3 times a week, and force would be go putting them on a treadmill, doing exercise they hate, and just looking at the time the whole time, being like, God, this is the worst thing ever, and just hating it. That's force. Versus they have a sport they like to play. They could burn the same amount of calories doing that, having fun, being joyful, being fully present in it. That's power, right? So I always encourage people to look at how you can leverage power versus force. Let's say you have an income goal you want to get to. Okay, well, there's different ways to make money, right? You can force it, you can work even more hours. You can work double the hours and maybe not get there. Versus if you're aligning with your unique talents and your unique gifts in a way that's inspiring to you, you're going to be able to really capture power and move towards that income goal with a lot more ease and a lot more flow. So I just think anyone who's running into this invisible wall in their life all the time, where they feel like they're just forcing it and they're just watching motivational videos and they're banging their head against the wall, it's like, maybe there's another way here, right? Maybe it's not just effort. Effort's a given. Of course, you want to achieve anything in your life, it's going to take effort. But like, I'm a big fan of paddle tennis. It's a new sport here in the world. That's the fastest growing sport.
Is
super fun.
Pickleball?
No, it's paddle tennis. So it's different. It's like a combination of tennis and squash. I live in basically South America here in Miami. So it's very popular here because it started in Mexico. Anyhow, so for me, going and playing, like an hour and a half goes by, like snapping my fingers. It's just so joyful. And like, I'll wear the Whoop. So I'll look at it. I'll be like burning 1,000, 1,400 calories, whatever it is in this hour and a half of playing. But if you put me on an elliptical and you said I had to get to a 1,400 calorie burn goal, it'd be like pulling teeth. It's just like, God, this is just suffering. And I've been there. I've done things both ways, right? Like when I was a football player, I was a D lineman. So I had a lot of weight to lose when I finished my football career. So I used to get on the elliptical and just try to lose weight through pure force.
How much did you weigh?
I got up to just under 250.
And what do you weigh now?
Around 195.
Nice.
Yeah. And I've been leaner at times, but I did boxing for a while and that brought me down to like closer to like 180, 185. And now I've got back to lifting. So I put a little more mass on.
Nice. How tall are you?
6'2".
6'2". Nice. 6'2", 250. That's a good size.
Not bad.
Yeah.
Not bad. But my body fought against it. That was another example of like force. Like I probably would have done great more as like a long distance endurance athlete, but I wanted to play football. So I just forced it. And like me at 250 was not like, obviously I imagine that maybe what you were like. I have a guy here, he played the same position as me. He was like 270, 6'5", 6-pack abs. Like for me, it wasn't that. It was just like an unhealthy pushing 250, hypertensive blood pressure,
Sure.
Just joints aching, just not good. So I think it's so big, and I talk about in the book about uncovering your unique talent, unique gift. And I think it's so important to live life in this curious way, to uncover like, what is that for me? Where can I find that alignment where I truly feel powerful? And that's what this was for me, is like, I learned that I'm just naturally really good at this healing work. Like I'm an intuitive person, so I can feel the issues people have that they're maybe not aware of. Versus when I play football, it's just banging my head against the wall. Like nothing ever came easy for me there. So it's okay to do hard things. It's just you're going to find so much more success when you find the things that align in that powerful way of unique talent. I think the Ikigai, if you've heard of that, it's a Japanese.
Oh, Ikigai.
Ikigai.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right. So what do you enjoy most? What are you the best at? What's going to help others? And what you can actually be able to contribute to in a way that's going to make you a living. So aligning that way, I think that's where our power comes from.
To just kind of circle back a little bit on that, like subconscious programming, like where does this stem from? I mean, is it bad wiring? Is it society? Is it, social norms, people? I just keep going, trying to figure out like where this subconscious programming went wrong. Like I feel like, with programming, there's good programs and bad programs, just like good movies and bad movies. Like, how come we keep playing these bad movies for people and this negative programming that's kind of manifesting, obviously, in, like you said, 70% obesity and all these other problems we keep running into. So like, where does this stem from, and how do we like cut it off and interact with it?
Yeah, I would say it stems from constructs of control, the matrix that you talked about that we've been born into, where it's very advantageous for people to keep control over you when you're constantly thinking about the future and what you haven't done enough of yet, and that you're not enough, basically living in fear. We're addicted to fear. If we can overcome fear as a society, as a species, because I think adults, we don't need fear. We can use the discernment, right? We don't have to walk into oncoming traffic. We don't have to be fearful of that. You can use discernment and be like, that won't be good for me if I do that. So I think as adults, overcoming fear is the greatest thing you can do. And so how do you get there? You start to feel into the programming that you have that's making you feel fearful. And so I think that we've been programmed for many, many generations. So it's like your parents and their parents and their parents before that have all been programmed in fear, which perpetuates it. So we're being born into it, and you experience it in different ways. Maybe your parents were afraid of money and they're really anxious about that. Or maybe there's cancer that runs in the family and they're so afraid of being unhealthy. Or maybe, your family member got cheated on and they're so afraid of infidelity in the family, and it just gets perpetuated. So of course it comes from family and gets perpetuated. And then your own life, right? If you're a guy and you've dated a woman before that was cheated on when she was 16, and then when she was 19, then when she was 21, and then she's 23, and then she's 25, and by the time she's 27, she believes all men are cheaters because that's what she experienced. And so it's become perpetuated, and that's her belief. And the crazy thing about beliefs is that it's not just about the rational information. You will delete, distort, and generalize any information out there to make it fit your beliefs. So even though it's like, well, there's a lot of guys out there who aren't cheating, she believes all men are cheaters because she'll delete, distort, and generalize the information. So to answer your question, yes, we're programmed into it. It's our family. It's what we grow up around. It's what shared beliefs are of the people that are in our proximity, especially from the ages 0 to 7 in our tribe. And then it's the experience of life that are perpetuated. Like, I'm sure you experience this yourself. I experience this so much with professional athletes. Like, they're so afraid of people being out to get them. Someone's trying to get something. Someone was out to get me. And I think that's also perpetuated because, when you go into the rookie camp now, they basically give you all these lessons about how to avoid getting screwed over and people taking advantage of you and watch out for this. It's just fear, 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 fear. I pretty much have to work with this. Every professional athlete that I go through is like getting him out of that fight or flight fear of everyone that's out to get me, because you have to believe some people are there to help you if you're going to actually receive support that you need to flourish. So we're programmed into it. And how do we get over it? I think it's on an individual level. You don't try to fix anyone else. You do your own work. You don't go out there and be like, hey, you need to work on. No, do it for yourself. If you can do your own work, you can clear up your own inner planet, then you're responsible for what you did. And if you have tools that are going to help other people, sure, feel free to guide them towards doing the work on themselves. But ultimately, it's just individual work for each one of us to take responsibility for.
So if I was going to outline like a course or just like a process for this, is really just the first step acceptance, like understanding where your fears are and where they lie, and more importantly, how we overcome them. Because just thinking about why do people fail? And is it because most of the people are self-defeating, or is it that they're pre-programmed to fail, so they believe everything is going to fail? The statistics on marriage aren't very good, and the amount of divorces, and the reason being, and I've been married for 12 years, and I'm always fascinated by these kind of milestones, like, oh, if you make it to a certain age, or is it 10 years in this? And I think there's interesting milestones when you get married. Obviously, you get married, then you have kids. And then once those kids grow up and leave the house, I think that's a really interesting milestone. I joke with my wife, I'm like, when these kids leave and we're just looking at each other, then what? Do you have to figure out, do you just high five, shake hands, split everything up and be like, I'll see you on the flip? Or is it that you have to figure out, because as you have kids, I got 3, the amount of time and effort that you put into these kids like far outweighs, between business and all the other things. Like it's, I got, my son's at baseball camp today. My other daughter has conditioning, and she has basketball 3 nights this week. She got 3 games this weekend. My other daughter rides horses. I mean, the amount of like planning that my wife and I do to try to like orchestrate all this stuff. It's kind of like at the end of the day, you're like, man, so what'd you do today? It's in between work. So it's just an interesting piece, but I feel that there's, like you said, there's so much predictive programming going on about like, oh, divorce is high, men and women are different, and there's all these pieces, and I feel like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's just getting pushed on us.
There's a lot of over-rationalization, I think, right? And there's a lot of just accepted victimhood. Well, it's like this, and so it's going to be like that for me too. So part 2 of my book is literally a playbook where like you're like, what does the framework look like? That's what it'd be. Like it. So the first step is for anyone to just get a baseline. I don't know who does this. Like obviously you go to any personal development event, they force you to do this, but you don't have to go to Tony Robbins. Love Tony, but you don't have to go to one of these events to do this for yourself. Just look at these buckets of your life and be real with yourself. Like how satisfied am I on a daily basis with my peace of mind? Like how it feels to be me really. Because a lot of people won't even go there. They're like, oh yeah, I'm like, my kids are fine and my marriage is okay and I'm making enough money. I'm fine. That's not what we're here for. We're here to have this human experience, which is the feeling experience. It's a spiritual experience, really, this incarnation that we get to have here. So everything stems from how does it feel to be you right now? So baseline, in general, how does it feel to be you? Give yourself a score from 1 to 10. 1 being feels so bad you don't want to live anymore. So 10 is complete wholeness. Physical health, be real about it. 1 to 10. Your career, 1 to 10. How satisfied are you? Really, how satisfied are you with what you do? Not how much money you make, with what you do, how you spend your time. Finances, 1 to 10. 10 is a feeling of complete satisfaction with how much money you have, right? And just getting real on that. And then your relationships, your romantic relationships, your work relationships, and your tribe. I really encourage people to start there. That's awareness. And then just see, where am I weak? Because as you can imagine, most people want to focus on the area they're already strong. Someone comes to me and he's like, really successful CEO. And he's like, hey, like, I just need to make more money. And then we do a baseline check-in and it's like, your marriage is a 3 out of 10. Like maybe that feeling of something's missing, the emptiness is coming from what's being suppressed in this intimacy in your romantic relationship. And it's like, we heal that. Maybe it doesn't feel like there's something missing. You need any more money because you already have $10 million in the bank. All right. So we're going through the baseline. We're getting awareness there. And then we go deeper into the awareness. The next step is I have my clients and anyone who reads the book or anyone who wants to do this on their own, set alarms to go off every 3 hours just to ask themselves, how does it feel to be me right now? So they can become aware of their feeling experience. This is the beginning of the awakening process. So if you do this, you're really taking the red pill in the matrix, because no longer is your life just going to be beneath the surface, unconscious to you. You're going to start to see, well, how do I really feel? Because that's the only metric that truly matters. And over the time with the alarms, you're going to start to get a picture of how it does feel to be you. And you could take a next step, which is, where's my focus? And so do the alarms, but then see, what am I focusing on? How does that contribute to my feelings? And just notice how much of your own pleasure and how much your own suffering comes from where you direct your focus, because what you focus on is what you get. And when you focus on what you want, you get more of what you want. When you focus on what you don't want, you get more of what you don't want. And that sounds very common sense, but a lot of us are bad at this, right? That's why 80% on average people's thoughts are negatives, because you could focus on the fact that you don't have a Lamborghini, or you could focus on the fact that you have a car that takes you from A to B. You focus on what you have, what you want, you feel gratitude. You focus on what you feel like you're lacking, you're going to feel anxious. You're going to feel like in lack, not enoughness. So we got to see, where's our focus? We can actually train that like a muscle. So I have this whole process people are going through of actually awakening their awareness, understanding their feelings, seeing their focus, training their focus before we even get to the subconscious level and access programming. Because once we've gone through all that, I want someone to set a vision like, okay, this is where you're at right now, 1 to 10 areas of your life. Let's decide where you want to go. And don't tell me, hey, I want X, Y, and Z material thing. How do you want to feel? Right? When you're working in your career, how do you feel? You want to feel inspired. You want to feel purposeful. Maybe you want novelty. Everyone's different. So what do you want from that? What's the feeling experience you want to have? And then we reverse engineer it to, okay, what can I imagine doing or experiencing that would create that for me? And then once we get to that clarity, then we start to feel into what is the resistance and the emotion that I feel that is coming up when I think about achieving these things or participating in these actions or habits to get me there. And from there, we can start to uncover the subconscious programming in the body. We can start to purge it out. We could see and feel and experience all the beliefs that we're holding to be true that are in conflict with what it is we truly desire in life. And then we can accept them. We can surrender them. We can reprogram them, and then we integrate them.
Do you use psychedelics in any of this?
You can. It's not necessary. Psychedelics have been a powerful part of my journey. Personally, what I've experienced to be beneficial about them is if you experience a true ego death through a psychedelic, then you have a very visceral understanding of one, higher power that you can surrender to, because you realize that there's more than just the identity of the ego that you inhabit. It's actually something beyond you. So you have something to surrender to, which is beautiful. You actually get to experience God instead of just reading about it or hearing people tell you about it. You actually experience God. And then additionally, when you come back into your body again, you can actually see, wait a minute, I'm not these programs. These are just things that I'm believing to be true that are creating my emotional experience, but I'm way more than this. So you have a little bit of separation where you don't have to identify so closely with the identity. You can view it more matter-of-factly and do that deeper work without being like, no, this is me, don't change it. So yeah, psychedelics are a powerful tool, but I'll be honest, most of my clients that I work with do not do psychedelics. And that's okay as well. It's a tool that's available if you want to use it. And for me, it's not something that you go back to over and over and over and over again. It's more of like an anchoring into an awareness and an experience that can be a teacher for you, but it's not something that is a crutch that you have to keep going back to experience these results we're talking about.
Yeah, there's a book called The Immortality Key. Did you ever read that?
Yeah, I've read it, but I have terrible recall, so I couldn't tell you what it's about. I just,
dude,
it's very dense as well.
Yeah, no, I have like weird recall of stuff, but the one piece I do remember from that, he kept talking about like the religion of no name and dying before you die, and basically the death of ego at the hands, and I think it was through like Eleusis and like the cult of Eleusis, which was the early Christians, and how when they went back and I think the reason it was given to me was I thought it was really interesting that the original writings from the Christian mystics that they were able to pull out of the Vatican were identical to the people that they were able to give the dose of psilocybin to that were in that. I think it was like in the 70s. There was stage 4 people with stage 4 cancer. There was a study done at Duke, and they gave them this hit of heroic dose of psilocybin, and then they sat and recorded what they said, and their perception of God and what they were feeling was identical to these original Christians. And so the guy wrote the book based off that, but that whole idea of Eleusis and, the death before or die, if you can truly die before you die, and this idea that they knew that there was something out there because they had connected. And somebody gave it to me actually, because the experience that he had with organized religion was very similar to mine. I was raised Catholic. We would go and I would sit there and listen to these sermons and see all this like pageantry and the whole deal. And I remember feeling like, why not me? Like, why don't I feel what these people feel? Like, how come these people are so overtaken with the Holy Spirit? And you'd see these, like it just felt kind of just weird. Like we're sitting here learning about this person in this book, and there's these words on a page which were originally written in Aramaic and then translated into Greek and then Latin and then English. And so there's, the telephone lost in translation. Is this real? And when you ask these questions, nobody answers the questions. They just tell you to shut up and you don't know what you're fucking talking about. And there was no like colorful discussion on anything. So I always have had this huge problem with organized religion. Like at the Catholic Church, I mean, they systematically allowed people within their organization to hurt children and then hit it. You look at the preachers down here in Texas driving around and flying helicopters to go to their mega churches and jets. I mean, it just feels very disingenuous. So I've always wrestled with that, and somebody gave me that book, and that book was extremely impactful for me because it answered. I mean, the guy, I think his name is. I pulled it up. Can't remember what his name is. I think it's like a Michael something, but he talked about it in the same way. And I feel like a lot of what he discussed in the book would help people today, because people are so enamored with who I am, what I am, and more importantly, all the things I have to do, that they forget that, like, why are we here? And more importantly, like, what's the body of work that we want to present at the end? Like, I think of life a lot like a thesis in college, or a graduate thesis or terminal degree. Like, what's the body of work that you're presenting? And you might have seen it, but like, when I was pretty young, there was a movie that had Albert Brooks in it, and it was called Defending Your Life. And what happens is you die, and then you go to like this purgatory, and you have to get up and actually present your life, and you have a defense attorney and then another attorney, and they basically decide whether or not you've lived a good life and you get to go into heaven, or you get to go do it again. And I always thought, like, that movie, I've always had in the back of my mind being like, at some point you're going to have to stand up and defend your actions, whether or not you believe in the St. Peter and whatnot. But, and I tend to think that more so than like a heaven and hell, I think there's more reincarnation than anything, just for the fact that whenever I meet people that are kind of, I don't know, pieces of shit, I just think that they're young. This is their first or second time around. They got to come around a lot more to be better versions of themselves. But as you get into this, would you say that the professional athletes and the high-level performers that you work with are more deficient on this side of like knowing who they are, because they've always just taken their identity so far from what they've accomplished, more so than other people that maybe haven't accomplished as much, but maybe know more about themselves because they haven't been distracted by this?
You feel into that. Like, are they more identified with their ego identity than the average person?
Yeah. So that was something I encountered, where guys were so focused on the ego and what they attained that I think they didn't know who the fuck they were. And more importantly, they didn't know what they wanted. They didn't know what they accomplished. And it was just easier to kind of focus on and really just tie everything to this, this big success or the big ring or the big suit or all these other things. And really just lacked an understanding of who they were and more importantly, what they wanted in life.
Yeah. You know what's interesting? Like, I talked a little bit about frequency earlier. And I think about like a radio station. Mm-hmm. It's like, if you're tuned into the same station, you'll meet people there. So I think I'm just attracting in people who are in the same frequency, who are ready to do this work. And so they're less identified, and I was just visiting one of my baseball players in Toronto a few days ago, and he was just talking about this, very thoughtful, young dude, 26 years old, just thinking about how he's so much bigger than the sport he's playing, even though he's like the face of the franchise, and just how he thinks about like, who am I going to be when I stop playing, and just like the greater being that he is, which is why I think he sought out this work, is because he's asking these questions, he's feeling deeper into it. So like what you're saying, I think so many guys do over-identify. I think that just not coming into my world, because they would be doing this work, and I think they're not ready for it yet. And I think when they are, they'll come see me. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I think, light attracts light, dark attracts dark. I mean, I've had people, and let me see how I put this without sounding like a complete fucking asshole. I think there was a lot of shady stuff that went down when I played in the NFL, whether it be sexually, I just think there's just
a lot of darkness.
Yeah, a lot of darkness, and I didn't see a ton of it. And I think because I don't really subscribe to it. Yes. And when it used to kind of pop up, people asked me some stuff. I'm like, man, I never saw that. Like, that just wasn't anything I was aware to. But I also told dudes, I'm like, hey, man, that's not really, like I wasn't married. I didn't have kids. I didn't have a family until I retired, just because I thought that I don't know if I would have done a good job of being married in a family at the time, when like being a professional athlete is such a selfish endeavor. Like, I knew that it needed. And that was the way I thought in my 20s. Now that I'm older and I have a wife and kids, I realize I could have very easily had been able to balance both. And I think what happened was, when I came in the NFL as a rookie, all the older guys were all like divorced and going through these fucking terrible, just like the worst shit I've ever heard. And I remember thinking like, man, like, this isn't a life I want to lead. So I'll just wait till I retire. And so I didn't, get married and meet my wife until after I retired. But now that I have kids, I think, man, it would have been fun for them to have seen me do this job, and for them to have kind of grown up and seen dad do it. Because I just saw like a cool picture of Christian McCaffrey. He signed that big deal with his dad sitting on the sideline. I was like, man, that would have been neat for my kids to see me have played. But at the time, I just didn't feel like I had the emotional bandwidth to be able to be a good dad, be a husband, be able to do all these things. And I think I was selling myself short. But, we kind of live and learn, and I don't regret that decision. But I think like I used to see guys that had wives and kids and families and just fucking all over the place. And I just remember thinking I don't like to lie about stuff. I don't want to have to bullshit anybody. I don't want to have to be untruthful. There was do you ever see any clips of John Gotti when he got interviewed by the defense or the prosecution? John Gotti was up, big gangster. Mm-hmm. And he was up there and they were asking him about his business and he was totally honest. And the prosecutor said to him, Mr. Gotti, you're being so honest right now. We've never had anybody get on the stand and be honest. And he's like, well, I don't fear you. The only reason people lie is out of fear. And I don't fear you motherfuckers. So I got no problem telling you the truth. So I heard that pretty early on. I thought, man, the only reason people lie is out of fear. So I never want to put myself,
100%.
I never want to put myself in that position where I got to bullshit or lie to anybody because I don't want to have to fear anything. So just it's easier to live a more honest life. And I feel like a lot of guys that I worked with and guys that I played with lied about a lot of things, not only to themselves and the people. And it just felt very dark and kind of disingenuous and weird to be around.
Yeah. And then their marriage is in shambles, not just because of anything that did out of infidelity. Yes, that's part of it. But because the dynamic becomes they have to step into this feminine role in the relationship. The man does, because he's constantly trying to make up for it, right? It's like, oh, I'm running away. I have to keep something from you. Like I'm in trouble. It's like you're a little boy.
Yeah.
You end up being like a little boy. And that's something I see, not necessarily with my clients, but when they tell me about teammates, is just like their wives end up being like their mothers in a way. And it's like, oh, you're in trouble. It's like, it's disgusting, really, that type of relationship, which it's not with everyone, but I'm hearing it can be very common.
Well, why is it? Because these guys have such financial means. Like, this is an interesting, man, like, how do I say this, dude? I think women will put up with a lot of stuff if the man is famous and has money. Whereas I think like if the dude was broke and fucking nobody knew it, they'd be like, I'm out the door. But because of like fame and money and, he takes care of me and buys me nice gifts and buys shit, like, I saw a lot of that. And that was almost the relationship. And I remember thinking like, this is fucking weird, man. Like I have a mom. I don't need to be married to a mom.
Exactly.
Even though my wife's a great
living in
mom.
The truth.
Yeah.
Just live in the truth. Say, if you have a certain idea for like the dynamic of relationship that you want, like lead with that. That's what I always tell any of my athletes who aren't married yet. I'm like, whatever dynamic you want for a relationship, you're in a position where you can ask for it.
Sure.
And if the girl's not into it, that's fine.
Then find a new
then
one.
Maybe this isn't the season of life for that. But just be truthful. Because like you said, like every lie is born out of fear. So if you're starting a relationship, not being truthful with what you truly desire, there's going to be fear littered in your life, and that's going to bleed into the field or the court. It's just going to be something that you have to carry with you. So just live in the truth.
Do you know Steve Weatherford?
Yeah, I've seen him played for the Giants, right? He was a kicker.
Yeah. No, I know him, and it was pretty interesting. Like he, obviously got out of being a professional athlete, and now he's, I think he's got a ministry, and he's really gone, turned to God and has this big ministry and works with a ton of men. But like all of a sudden it popped up on social that he's like, I have a porn addiction. And I was like, okay, like what's a porn? Like I actually texted him. I'm like, what do you like? Porn addiction? Like, what do you mean? He's like, I was driving around in my car for like everywhere I went. I'm like, at the gym, and I'm listening to porn, and I'm watching porn. I'm in the car. It's taped to my steering wheel. I'm driving around the neighborhood, not wanting to go home because I'm looking at porn. I was like, okay, that's fucking weird. Why? And I mean, is this a dopamine thing? And he, was, life in shambles in this, and was able to make a 180 and, walk back to light, to quote him. But it's pretty interesting that like, he was so far and had to go so far this way. And I always wonder for professional athletes that if the life that you live is so extreme, that does everything else have to be extreme,
Yeah, I think maybe it becomes that way, but it doesn't have to be that way. I think coming back to it, right? Just
like, how do you
how
create
are you?
balance? I think really the thing that I've taken from this and part of your work is like, how do you create, like, let people see the predictive programming, let them see understand and make the subconscious available, clear away the rubble, and then like give them balance in their life.
Yeah. Well, we do it by auditing their belief system, make sure nothing's in conflict in their life right now. Right. Because some of it's just like things that need to change, like real physical things. Are you in a relationship you shouldn't be in anymore? Right. Do you have people around you that are toxic and bringing you down? Right. Is your posse actually like bringing more toxicity and bringing more drama to your life than what you're getting from it on the positive end? I think that it's both of those things. It's like we have to, but it's all a byproduct of the subconscious program. Because I'm sure you had guys that you played with that had posses, right? And they're just like, just be taking from the. In baseball, it's really common, especially in like the Latin countries, Dominican Republic stuff. Like everyone has their posse, and it's almost like they believe that they owe it to these people. But then it creates all this drama in their life, and that's just a program that they're running. They don't have to believe that. They can actually transmute that belief and believe that what's best for them is going to be best for everyone else and make their decisions from that place. So I think all of the negative actions that people are taking are just a byproduct of poor programming that's being manifested in the physical realm.
So how do you save these guys from it? I mean, like especially professional baseball, like at least for football, they kind of make you go to school. A lot of the baseball players don't have education. So they probably have like a comfort zone, or just like they're encased comfort by having people around them that like are their boys that knew them way back when, but yet don't really have any function. Like they're like, we were bringing up Vinny Chase. I mean, it's like Turtle and the guys, like their fucking business model is just hanging out with the star and making sure that he lives his life, which to me feels extremely like that'd be like having kids before you have kids. I mean, just like taking care of these people. I mean, and they have a weird, and not to say that they shouldn't have some form of like alliance to the people that were with them, but to the detriment when like those people become a draw and they're parasitic upon the athlete. Like I saw that shit all the time where, families were, parasiting off of, and I kept telling guys, I'm like, hey, the day you get cut and you don't make money, those motherfuckers aren't going to give you a single phone call. I remember the day I retired, my phone didn't like ring. It was empty. And I thought it was the greatest thing ever. I literally threw the phone in the trash, went and bought a brand new one and started over. And if I never heard from people, I'd get random texts and I'd be like, new phone, who dis? Was the joke I used. But it was extremely freeing to retire and feel like I don't have to deal with any of these people anymore. And you just kind of collect barnacles over time. So and I think in professional baseball, the careers are so long and the money is so big that I was laughing with my brother about the Japanese dude whose translator had blew like 17 million on gambling and he didn't even see the debt. Like,
yeah, I think I heard about that. It's crazy.
I mean, talk about like, and they did a really good job of just wiping it away and disappearing, but like that dude should be suspended. I mean, this guy was using his money to bet on games. I mean, bet on, everything. Just like the level of impropriety like is unbelievable. And they just kind of like, and that guy has that much access to your money. I mean, he had to be more than just a translator, but to not notice 17 million, that's insane to me.
Yeah. A lot of I think the translators they're kind of, just a posse, right?
Just
I think that's basically, they fill a similar type of role. But yeah, what do these people do? Well, they come to me and they get reprogrammed and I free them of that so they can be present, be aware and act and live from inspiration. But there's a lot of guys like me, a lot of people out here doing this type of work. Because I believe it's spiritual work is what we're talking about. Because have you read the book Power vs. Force? Have you heard of that?
No. No, it's a good one. But
David Hawkins.
I have a deal that whenever somebody recommends a book, I usually buy it and read it immediately. So I feel like people are like, oh, do you have a reading list? I'm like, it's usually whatever people on the podcast recommend to me. I tend to read very quickly. So I'll buy this one.
If you speak to anyone in the, spiritual community, it's just like, it's their Bible, if you will.
Oh,
because it talks about spiritual laws and just brings a little bit more like science into all this talk of like frequency. And so every emotion lives in a different frequency. And our goal here, the spiritual work, is to move up into higher and higher frequencies. And so we all know this to be true when we talk about, oh, that person's low vibe. You've heard people say that.
Yeah.
That person's high vibe.
Yeah.
That's spiritual conversation. Because what you're saying is like someone's functioning at a low emotional frequency. So the lowest emotional frequency you can live in is shame. And the second lowest is guilt. And it's pretty funny how organized religion put so many people there in the absolute, that's the farthest you can get away from God. And that's how so much, that's how they keep control over you, right? They go, no. Here you go. You're separate from this. You're separate from God. Versus the highest frequency you can get to is enlightenment. And so for me, that is the ability to be incarnate in this physical existence, but really live from the present moment. Like really be here, fully be involved in what's happening all the time and live in this perpetual presence, which I'm definitely not there, but I come in and out of. And that's the work I think here. And what I've noticed is the more you clean up your inner planet, the higher your emotional frequency is as a baseline. So we want to get to enlightenment, but below that is pretty good experiences. There's joy, there's peace, there's love, all these other higher emotional frequencies that we want to live in and we want to operate in. And if you're someone, this is something I've had to move a lot of athletes through because I work through with a lot of UFC fighters and boxers, is they can actually function at these very high frequencies and be absolute killers, because it doesn't mean that you're not aggressive in these frequencies. It just means that you're operating from a high emotional frequency. Like you can radiate love and go take someone's fucking head off. And that might sound like funny and contradictory, but everything's a paradox.
Sure.
That's the thing about this world. It's yin and yang. Everything's always contracting and expanding. It's everything. And everything has range within it. So what I'm doing with my clients is I'm trying to bring them to the highest frequency possible. And I think that is what we're here in this physical existence. Because you talked about, okay, do you need to get incarnated or you get to go on to heaven? What are we doing here? We're here to bring ourselves into a higher and higher emotional frequency. Like that is the most, for me, that just makes the most sense. It's like, what else would we be here for? Because as you evolve as a person, you're able to become someone who can live at these higher emotional frequencies. When you see someone who's not evolved, right? You said someone who's like just an asshole all the time. Well, we know they're not evolved because they're living in a low emotional frequency. When you see someone who's peaceful all the time, you go, wow, that person's really evolved.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that evolution is a spiritual one more than anything else.
So how do you, man, I laughed when you said shame, because I always felt that shame was kind of a powerful motivator, you know, like not necessarily like shame in who I am, but like a fear of failure that like, you know, I need to be able to like hold the standard. So I think maybe shame is not the right word for it, but like when I played,
maybe it's just fear or anger is more what you're feeling.
I had like an overwhelming fear that somebody was working harder than me and they were going to be more successful than me. So, you know, I mean, playing offensive line, I get to go one-on-one fist fight a dude for 3 hours. And the thought that like this individual is going to, you know, have done more work and be more prepared and, you know, make me look like a fool in front of people. So like that feeling of like, you know, I've used the word shame, but it's not the right term, but it's like this idea of like, you know, I always imagined everybody as King Kong, that like every week, and it was because every week I was going against some future Hall of Famer or some Pro Bowl or some guy that's the best in the world. So like you end up building everybody up as King Kong, and then you end up doing pretty well, or, you know, pitching a shutout or doing real well. And you're like, oh man, maybe they just had an off day. Thank God. And I remember telling my brother that. He's like, you've had 10 years of catching people on their off days. I'm like, I hope I catch everybody on their off day. Yeah. But, you know, the frequency is pride. It's pride oscillating with fear. That's what I'm hearing, is pride. Like when you're at your best there, you're in a lot of pride. That's the emotional frequency of pride. And that's why pride's not the best frequency to be in. It's a lot higher than a lot of really low ones. But even like this whole movement around, you know, not to take the conversation in a different direction, but like having a month about pride, that's not where you want to get to. No.
You want to get to acceptance. You want to be in acceptance.
No.
Pride is not a great emotion. It can be. It's a prove it, right? Like you're saying, you're trying to prove it. When you're pride, you're trying to prove it. So the whole pride movement is like, I'm going to prove it to you, versus like evolve beyond that. Just accept it.
Well, pride is
don't just be prideful. Accept who you are in your position.
Well, pride is like a mortal sin, right? Like what was the movie with Brad Pitt? Seven? Yeah, Seven. And I always remember pride being one of the mortal sins, like gluttony. Like that movie was Still to this day might be one of the better movies I've ever seen, one of the scariest movies I've seen.
Yeah.
But that idea of like, pride or, no, I mean, that's probably a pretty good one. I definitely am or at least I was a very, not fear driven, but like fear of failure. The idea that, like you're going to go out and fail in front of people, which I don't recommend for people, but for some reason it worked for me.
Yeah. I mean, listen, that's force, right? You could achieve a lot with force. Like we see a lot of people and you see they achieve tremendous amounts through force. So we're not saying they can't be an effective tool, but the transcendent thing we're talking about here is, can you align with power so you can be joyful in your achievement? That's what we're talking about. Yeah. You could achieve so much. Like you could achieve everything. We've seen it, Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, guys who just force, and they were the top of their sport. It's like, what we're talking about here is like, can you bring the spiritual in now and align with your power and be joyfully successful?
Do you think Michael Jordan is happy?
I've never met him. I never like to comment on people that I haven't had intimate experiences with.
Did you watch his Last Dance?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, I watched it, and the thing I took from that is I don't think that this guy is a happy individual in any way. I mean, I feel like he is in a daily fight to try to somehow prove something to himself. Probably I think Jordan was the best player, and I know he believes that, but I always wonder, like, if you really were that best player, like, why do you, like, the weird pieces of, like, I was against this guy in here, and like the weird little battles, I was like, oh my God, dude, like, this dude was so fucking petty. Like his level of pettiness is like nothing I've ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, from the outside looking in, he doesn't seem very happy. I don't like to cast judgment on people I haven't met and shared time with, because I'm so energy sensitive, right? Where I can like feel into someone's body and like I really know what it's like. This may sound weird, but I know what it's like to be them in many ways emotionally. And until I get to really share that energy with someone, I don't like to cast judgment. I know that's kind of like I'm not good at hot takes.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think of this person?
No,
I don't know. Let me experience her energy.
I've never met Jordan, but, always was a fan of his ability to execute at the highest level under the greatest form of stress. I think that's like the greatest athletes. I mean, everybody can do it when like there's nobody in the stands and it doesn't mean anything, but you put somebody on like the biggest stage and the biggest competition and put the ball in their hands in the last second and see how they do. I think that's the marker for it. And Jordan's, proved that over and over again. But the one thing I took away from it is like, dude, this guy is really petty. I mean, holding grudges. I mean, it's how he built it up in his mind. I mean, I think he was the best and he had to literally build everybody up. So he constantly had something to compete against. So I think it was like, it wasn't those people's fault, but, it's why we get so many great memes of him. It's great. He's like, and I took that personally,
Yeah. Speaking of pride, he's pride for sure.
Oh,
that was the main frequency.
Yeah.
It was all pride.
Yeah. I mean, and, the story, they're like, oh, he got cut from his high school basketball team. And I'm like, a lot of people got cut from a high school basketball team. So the fact that they stacked that one on there, it's probably pride. So if you could give the audience and the people listening one thing to do to improve their day and to move on to a better frequency and a better version of themselves, what would it be? Like what,
oh man,
what's one simple takeaway?
Yeah. I thought about giving them something to do, but I feel like most people they don't like to do things. So I'm just going to give, right?
Yeah. No, people don't like to do shit.
Yeah. So instead, I'm just going to give people permission to allow themselves to be there. And I want them to even say to themselves right now, say, I'm there. Because let's say your life is on this timeline and the left's the past. It's already happened. It's already dead. You can't change it. We can't go into the past. The right's the future. But the right is an illusion because you never get there. By the time you get there. You're in the present. So give yourself permission right now just to see this future you built up of if I, this whole mountain of achievement and milestones to get to and projects to get done with. And when I want you to detonate that and just watch it collapse in a puff of smoke. Watch the dust settle and give yourself permission to be there right now, because there's always going to be something you want to achieve in the external world in the future, but everything you need is within you right now. So just tell yourself, I am there. Embrace it, enjoy it, and go do whatever you're going to do anyway, just from that presence.
That's awesome. So if people want to get more information, they want to know where to pick up the book, how do people get in touch with you?
Yes, I'm very active on Instagram, Brandon Epstein _ my website, thebrandonepstein.com. And the book is called Program to Fail. It's available on Amazon. That's probably the best place to get it.
Cool. Well, dude, thanks so much for taking the time, man. It was awesome.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me and giving me an opportunity to share a little bit of my story with your audience.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure.
And if you're in Austin, dude, hit me up. We'll go out and get something to eat.
Absolutely.
All right, man. Thanks for tuning in. See you.
Bye.
And thanks, dude. That was fucking awesome. Hopefully I was giving you some softballs and some hard ones, but hey there, Power Athlete Nation. Big shout out to all the heavy hitters who stuck around till the final whistle. If you've been soaking in the knowledge bombs and epic tales we've been dropping for free, here's your chance to be a game changer. Swing by klfi.com/powerathlete and toss a few bucks our way to keep the podcast fueled and firing on all cylinders. That's ko-fi.com/powerathlete. Your support makes a difference. See ya.